If you don't mind, I'd like to introduce Julien Villa-Massone, notable for not only his science and engineering credentials, but also his keen business and management capabilities. Julien Villa-Massone is the Chief Sales Officer and co-founder of Moonscape, whose mission is to support the upcoming cislunar industry by providing orbital observation services. He attended the Space Studies program at International Space University. He has an MBA and a Master of Science in Global Management from the Thunderbird School of Global Management. And he has training and education in electronics engineering and physics in Paris, Germany, and Spain. He also obtained his commercial pilot's license earlier this year. Congratulations. Please welcome Julien to Bernardo Week.
Thank you very much, Laila. Very gracious. Hi, everyone. Thanks. The goal for me here is to talk about the upcoming missions to the moon. I have a presentation for about 20-25 minutes and then a couple of questions, if any. So first of all, I just wanted to say why the moon. I guess it's obvious for everyone in this conference, but I think it's still really interesting to go back to this question. And for me, there's really three reasons. One of them is that it's like the Everest, right? It's there, so we should go. The other one is the science and industrial potential. Melissa's talk right before me was music to my ears. And then the third thing is it's a stepping stone for Mars missions. So here is what I'm going to cover. First, the history. Then we'll look at the outlook. So what are the next missions coming up from 2020 to 2035 in the different regions in the world? And then I prepared a couple projections. So history. It's going to be pretty quick. So first of all, there's a really cool website. If you guys don't know it, it's on the top left. This is just a screenshot of it, so it's not dynamic, but the actual website is dynamic. And you can look at what have been the missions and what are the future missions. So this is just to point out that the US and Russia have historically been obviously the most active on lunar missions. But China has been catching up a little bit. And the same goes with India and Japan. While Europe, and I'm French, haven't been very active in that space, only one mission, and Israel had also one mission. So looking at the landing missions, again, the US and Russia have had the most missions, and obviously, Apollo have been the only one crewed, but China had already 2 missions, and one more currently happening now. They landed actually on this part, if you can see my mouse. Okay, so that was just a quick recap on history, so we can look at the future. And so this is based on the Bryce Space and Technology report, where we can see that there will be 95 missions from 2020 to 2030. And what I want to do here is to detail this a little bit. So these are direct projections from the Bryce report. That's the cumulative over 10 years. And we see that the US will be the most prominent player with 72 missions currently planned. Russia has eight missions, so that is the second in line, but not as great as the US. And then the next countries in line have 4 missions or less, so a total of 95. What I want to do is have a quick look at the actual data. I know this is boring to look at, so we won't spend too much time on this. But I thought it was very interesting to see that the US is the only nation that has a clear plan and like a regularity in the missions, and I would say a real vision. So, credit where it is due. Obviously, the changes there might be changes in the schedule, but I think the vision is there, and hopefully it will stay. So that's why there's so many missions, and I think it's fantastic. Looking at China, for example, there's not as many missions, but that is because some of the missions are not in the report yet. There is a plan for crewed missions that might happen in 2029. So hopefully that will go through. When it comes to Russia, and we'll see later, there's some robotic and some crewed missions. I think they're well represented here. And when we look at the rest of the world, including Europe, there's only 4 missions for Europe and then a couple more for other countries, but there's a gap. And I think some mining missions will start to appear on this report over time. And also, there's no real, discussion about Starship, which I think is might become very important in the future. I understand that they might be part of the CLIPS missions here, but will there be more? And what will that mean for the lunar industry? So I'm going to look at the US real quick because you guys have been talking about this, and most of you are Americans, so you know exactly what Artemis is all about. So that's what is driving all these missions, or most of them. And Melissa also talked about this just now, so I'm going to quickly move to the next. But just saying, Artemis is what drives all these missions in the US. Let's look at China. So these are in the news currently. So let's look at Chang'e. I don't know. I try to practice Chang'e, or I think that's the right way to say it. So this is a sample return mission, and the structure is a little bit like Apollo, where there's an orbiter that remains in orbit while the lander lands, then drills, and then a subset of that lander comes back, docks with the orbiter, and then that returns the samples to Earth. And the return is expected around December 16. So that is pretty fun. I look forward to that. But now looking at the history for China missions on the moon and for future missions, what we can see is that China started to launch missions to the moon in 2007, and the first lander was in 2013. And we have to remember that this was the first soft landing since the moon missions in the 70s. So after that, there's been more missions, and the last lander before the current one was in 2018. Now, looking at future missions, the next one will be in 2023, actually. It's in reverse order, but in the correct mission numbering. So 2023, 2024, all that will be landers. 2027 will be to test technologies. And what China wants to do is actually to have crewed missions after that. So that will be to test technologies to help those upcoming crewed mission from 2029. And the vision of China here is really a robotic lunar research station. So I think this is what China wants to do after 2030. So around 2030 and the years after that. It doesn't seem like they want to have an actual crewed station, but they want to have a robotic station. Okay, I'm going to look at Russia now. So looking at Russia, there's the set of Luna missions, which are robotic. Luna 20, and those have been delayed for quite a while, I think, at least a decade or something like that. So Luna 25, and you can see the picture on the left side, I think it's almost ready to launch. So it's scheduled to launch in 2021. And as you can see, there will be missions regularly. Luna 26 will be just an orbiter, but all the other ones will be landing. The one in 2027 will be a sample return. And the one in 2028 will have a rover, and that will help set the stage for future crewed missions. And this is the other program, the program Oriole, which is for crewed missions. So what you can see on the bottom right is the capsules. So they weigh 14 metric tons. Sorry for not talking in pounds. So in 2024, there will be the first uncrewed circumnavigation around the moon. And then there will be crewed missions, and they will try to land in 2029. They will use Soyuz 5, an iteration on the Soyuz rocket. I see that there are chats, so I don't know if I should look at this for a sec. Okay, it's not fun. Okay, so that was for Russia. Looking at Europe and Middle East, because there was not much in Africa at this point. So the history is actually quite limited. I was surprised to see that ESA had just one mission, which was launched in 2003. And that was just to test the technology and to do some science. And then you had a private flyby of the moon, which was the first time ever that a mission to the moon was actually private. And then last year, Space IL launched the Bereshit mission, which was a privately funded lander. So here are the pictures, by the way. And by the way, I should say that my partner in Moonscape is actually one of the officials of Bereshit. So these are the 3 missions that happened from Europe and Middle East. Now, looking at the future, there's 6 missions that I'm showing here. The first one is a UK mission launching next year that will be launched on the Peregrine payload as a Peregrine payload, and it will be to observe lava tubes. The next one will be launched in 2023, and this is based on Bereshit, but it's a cooperation between Germany, OHB, not Germany, the nation, but OHB, a German company, and IAI, an Israeli company. And they announced that they are launching a lunar surface access service. So they will try to launch landers to the moon regularly for commercial customers. The next one is the U.A.E. Space Agency's Rashid lander, planned to land on the moon in 2024. That is to develop technologies and pave the way for the Mars program, which the Mars program is a 100 years program. It's for 2011 and 17. That is the vision of this program. Okay, now the bigger landers. This one is from Airbus in 2025. It's called the Moon Cruiser 1. And it will actually also carry the Esprit module of the Gateway. And this one is the European Large Logistics Lander. This is by ESA, and that contains a rover and a sample return mission. This is in cooperation with JAXA and the Canadian Space Agency under the mission Heracles. That's in 2027. And finally, there's a lander called Alina by PT Scientists, a German company, but the launch date is not clear. So that's an overview of those missions from Europe, but I also noticed some things about mining. So Luxembourg recently created a new innovation center for space resources. So essentially, I think it's together with ESA, and it's well, it's a center for innovation. So it's like to help startups start their mining businesses or other companies to go into mining. So it seems that Luxembourg is trying to push pretty hard on mining. They also have specific laws for mining. So I suspect that a lot of things will come from Luxembourg in the next 15 years when it comes to lunar mining. Okay, I just wanted to remind all of you that Gateway also has components from ESA and from JAXA and from Roscosmos. So it is, and also from the Canadian Space Agency. So it is an international endeavor. And of course, NASA is leading this. Now, looking at Europe, again, at ESA, Jan Varner, the Director General, he's had that vision for a decade, I think, to have a moon village. So that is a snapshot of one of the modules, but he would like this to be an open station and that different member states and states around the globe can join. This would be a view of this with 4 different modules. So there is a vision in Europe for a moon village and for assets on the ground. But I think that in Europe, maybe we're not as cohesive and coherent as the US to have one vision and then to execute on the vision. So let's look at the rest of the world. So the history is 2 missions from Japan. The first one in 1990, actually, that's quite a while ago, and then a more recent one in 2007. And then India also had 2 missions, one in 2008 and one just last year, Chandrayaan-2, which is a science orbiter, and a lander, which I think did not succeed this time. Looking at the future for those regions, the top side here is Japan. So we have iSpace, which in cooperation with Draper are planning missions, landing and rover missions. They will launch on Falcon 9, by the way. There is, again, Japan, but now with the space agency, JAXA, who has a landing mission as well. So that's going to be from 2021 to 2023. And then at the bottom of this slide, you can see actually a university in Mexico called UNAM that has a very small mission to launch 9 micro rovers. There will be payloads on the Peregrine mission. Then you have ISRO, which is the Indian Space Agency, launching Chandrayaan-3. It will not have an orbiter, only a lander and a rover. And then finally in 2022, the Korean Space Agency will launch a lunar orbiter. So that is what the world is planning in terms of lunar missions in the next 15 years, as far as we can tell for today. Now, I've made a couple projections based on the Bryce report that I wanted to share with you. So the Bryce report here is in blue. That is exactly what you see in the report. That is the total cumulative number of missions. So I've made a conservative one where some missions don't make it because of financing or whatever other reason. I made a mid-range scenario that is sort of exactly the Bryce report, but some of the missions that we actually know today are not yet in the Bryce report, or there will be more announced and realized during this decade. So that is the mid-range, sort of correcting for the report. And then my optimistic scenario is a few more missions, let's say. So I think what's important to me when I think of this is not necessarily how many missions are they. If we want to have actual assets on the moon and do business there, the question is not how many missions. The question is, what is the cost per mass unit, so the cost per kilogram or the cost per pound landed on the moon? What is the capacity? So how many metric tons can we bring on a yearly basis, for example? And what industries can benefit from this? So these are projections that I made from those 3 scenarios: the conservative, the mid-range, and the optimistic. So when I project numbers here, what I see is that the conservative scenario, where we have a limited capacity and the price is very high, then we don't even launch as much as what the ISS weighs, which is 420 tons. With the mid-range scenario, we cross that just before 2030. But with the optimistic scenario, we go to 7,000 tons by the end of 2035, landed on the moon. So of course, that doesn't mean anything, it's just my projections. But if we think of the impact of Starship or of such rockets, and you start to see how much could be landed in total, you understand that you can really do some real industrial work. And that comes back to what Melissa was saying about mining, for example. Now, what helps drive this capacity is the cost. I mean, it goes hand in hand. So if you look at the cost here, the conservative is sort of, you don't have really rockets like Starship. So the costs go down over time because companies will make larger and larger transporters, I would call them. But that'll take time. Now, the opposite is the optimistic one, where Starship is available by 2022 and already reusable at a low cost. And that is sort of what Michael was saying earlier, sort of the singularity. So we didn't talk about this before, but you can see this incredible drop in cost. That is a singularity, and nobody knows exactly when it's going to happen. It might be here. So I'm zooming in on this chart now. And what we can see is that here I'm pointing some industries, whether the threshold, for example, for mass tourism, you need the cost to be very low for people to be able to afford flights to the moon, whether to the orbit or to the surface. So here what I'm saying is this could happen quickly if we're very optimistic, or less quickly if we're less optimistic. And I think mining is one of those that will happen sooner with a higher price, because they can really, the business case is stronger, but as the price goes down, more and more industries will benefit. So in essence, commoditization of the transport is what really matters. So, I mean, that's obvious for everyone here, but just to reiterate, as the government invests in missions and infrastructure, then the launch cost dramatically decrease, the infrastructure available goes up, and then the industries are those that drive the demand, not the governments anymore. And so I hope that we can get there one day. So looking at the industries, and that's according to me, there's the surface industries, which I think are the real drivers in the future. So science, mining, and tourism. And then you have supporting infrastructure on the ground, but also orbital. And in terms of that, there's communications, navigation, tourism, because there will be orbital tourism, I think, not just on the surface, but also observation. And I think that's one of those industries that will exist. And so this is why Yoav Landsman, my partner in this startup, and myself decided to work on this idea of an observation constellation in lunar orbit, and we called our startup Moonscape. And so we're currently exploring the market for this in Europe, in the US, and in other regions. And we will establish the company in Luxembourg in Q1 2021. So in a couple months. Yeah, so if you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate. That's it for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Very grateful to you, Julien. Really appreciate that. I want to point out that you're, with intention, you're the only non-American that we've had on our panels. And what we have really been trying to accomplish over the last couple of days has really been focused on 2020 to 2035, from here to the moon, right? What infrastructure is necessary to build out this cislunar ionosphere that we're talking about, as we close out, we've got 2-3 more presentations. As we close out this Blue Marble event, I really wanted to bring in some understanding and perspective of what's happening outside the United States. So if we decide to turn off our 70-some missions, I like how you said it's less about missions and more about cargo. That's an important distinction. I'm going to remember that. But if we decide not to do, pardon me, I've been talking for 3 days straight. My voice is going. If we decide not to take that step out to the moon, that's okay. We don't have to, but somebody else is going to, right? It's not just about us. I've not met Yoav, but certainly hats off to what Israel attempted. It makes for a hell of a crater, but I tell you, I'm not joking. I had my whole team sitting here watching that event, watching the Indian event. So whatever happens with the United States, we could decide to sit this out. I mean, we certainly have in the past, but there's going to be something else that happens. Other nations are going to step in. So you've gotten a lot of comments in the chat about great presentation. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Garretson has asked for a copy of those slides. So please make sure that you get in touch with them. Pete, did you have a specific question you wanted to ask, or just kudos? I wasn't clear on that.
Just kudos. What a fantastic presentation. Really showcases the unbelievable amount of activity going to the moon from tremendous diversity.
Thanks, Pete. And I should say that, again, that is just what is published, what has been announced. I'm pretty sure that there's at least double or more mission planned, but just not being announced. For example, Moonscape, I mean, we're working on this, and we will start this company, and nobody knows about it. And I'm sure there's a lot more companies like this, not just in the US, but everywhere in the world. This topic is getting, like incredible. Everybody is now interested in the moon. So, but kudos to you guys, to Americans, because I'm pretty sure it's thanks to you, and thanks to the vision that you guys have, and that sort of leads a little bit, others in the world. I think I'm not saying that you're the only reason. Like, some people want to do it themselves, but I think you are inspiring people.
So we've been talking, thank you, Julien. We've been talking quite a bit about workforce as infrastructure. That's also been one of the themes here. You're French, Yoav is Israeli, but you're setting up shop in Luxembourg. So why not set up shop in the United States? And I ask that because we've got a rep that it's her job to link industry to the region. So why Luxembourg, or versus why not the United States?
That's a great question, and I'm sure Yoav would like to maybe join me in answering. If you want to, feel free.
We have 3 minutes.
2 minutes. Yeah. So my answer is quite simple. I think the US would be a very good place to start this business. Obviously, we could apply to the SBIR program, for example, and I think the market size is larger, but I think we just can't, because we're not Americans, and it makes it almost impossible for us to do that. So we decided to launch our business in Europe because we can access this region. And Luxembourg is the obvious choice. I mean, there's other possibilities, but for the law and all the help that the government provides, this makes it an obvious choice for us.
I'm going to call on Yoav directly because I just saw your post in the chat. So tell me what that's about in 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'll start with what I said in a chat, that SpaceX announced today of their next mission to the moon. SpaceX is the organization that I worked for in the last 7 years until last year, that sent the parachute mission to the moon. The next mission will be an orbiter, a bit bigger than the first parachute, that will get into orbit around the moon and will release not one but 2 landers, very small landers that will land on the moon on 2 different sides, which is something that you can do with one.
Wow, that is incredible. I can't wait to look into that more. And I would argue that just put Julien's presentation out of date, because that mission was not on his chart. So, dude, slacking, man. You brought bad data. I'm just kidding. Thank you, both of you. Appreciate that. We are going to swap over to.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We're going to swap over to Lila to keep us on track and on schedule. Gentlemen, really appreciate your insight and your ambition. Thank you.